Hello, and welcome to the 6-5 Summit. I'm Fred McClymans, an analyst at Futurum Research, and on behalf of the team at Futurum and the team at More Insights and Strategy, we're glad to have you. In this fireside chat, featured in our automation track, Futurum's Shelley Kramer speaks with UiPath CFO Ashim Gupta about the future of work. He shares with us UiPath's desire to equip everyone with a robot in the future and talks about the opportunity that presents to transform the workplace. In his previous role at UiPath, he worked with clients to help maximize the adoption and value of RPA, robotic process automation, which definitely comes through in this conversation. Let's take a look.
Welcome, Ashim, and thanks so much for being part of our 6-5 Summit event today. It's great to have you. What I love, I'll be honest, what I love about having you here today is that you're not a marketer, you're not a CEO with a kind of a carefully honed marketing message to share. You're the numbers guy. And when it comes down to the impact of technology on the bottom line, numbers, of course, play a pretty important role. So before we get started in our conversation, I'll note here that before you stepped into the CEO role at UiPath, you were UiPath's Chief Customer Success Officer, which I also love because that means you were overseeing your team's work with customers, helping to maximize adoption and helping your clients along the road to self-sufficiency and really getting actual business value out of RPA software investments. And that, of course, is a very big thing as well. So you're the whole package. You understand what it takes to actually realize business value from RPA, and it's just such an important part of the equation. So it's great to have you here.
Thanks so much, Shelley. Really appreciate the warm introduction, and I feel like I'm on the same journey as many people, and I just love what we're doing, love our customers, and really love what UiPath is doing right now.
Well, I do too. So let's talk a little bit about this. I know that we've talked about, like what if everyone in your company could delegate their drudgery and to, what does it mean when we talk about, at a high level, the benefits of robotic process automation and what it is your clients or your customers are seeing?
Yeah, so let me start with what our purpose is. So Daniel Dines, our CEO, he really set the purpose for UiPath is to accelerate human achievement. And underlying that is this promise that says people want to use their creativity, use their problem solving that is really unique to what we are as people, and apply that in the most hours that they're working. Unfortunately, we're consumed with a lot of manual tasks, like you say. So I often joke, if you look at a finance job, forgetting about whether it's an accounting or FP&A, a lot of our job descriptions can be written as click, type into, and so just some small actions that we are consumed with, versus actually using our brain to think about what can happen. UiPath really brings technology through hyperautomation. And what we do is we use our software robots to emulate human tasks. And so what that allows, our customers to do, and what we've seen them use, is say, what are the things we don't want people to be doing? Because those are things that are more manual, they're less on the creative side, they're lower on the value scale. I will never say something is completely having zero value. And so our customers really look at that to say, automate even the simplest tasks to the most complex process so you can really allow people to do what they're best at. That is collaborate, problem solve, and drive a business forward in a way that machines cannot.
Well, absolutely. And, the other part of that value proposition is that employee satisfaction is greatly increased because we're not doing the stuff that, that has to be done, but that we don't love to do and that doesn't require that creativity. So as you know, we recently partnered with you all for a study on the state of automation. And one of our findings around the use cases driving RPA investments were pretty clear. Our survey respondents overwhelmingly shared that they were looking to their RPA investments to help them do just a handful of things: increase profits, improve productivity, simplify complex systems, and improve the employee experience. So you really just touched on all of those things. And I think that now more than ever, in pandemic driven times when we've had to make a shift from, working on site at an office to working remotely, and people needing to do a lot of different things remotely that they're not used to having to do, I think that makes these things even more important. So what my question for you is, one of the most important pieces of the messaging associated with UiPath is a robot for every person. Can
Yes.
you talk a little bit about what you mean by this?
Yeah, of course. So what we want to be able to do is democratize automation, the consumption of automation, as well as the creation of automation in many cases. So, just relate back to me, if you think about 20 years ago when I was in a mainframe system doing accounting, I would have to go to IT to go and really look to kind of code in languages I didn't understand to be able to improve processes. I'd say, here's my problem, and I would wait for a solution. And then that solution would be deployed, but it would be deployed, in the system. And while that is, something that will exist and continue to exist and is important for us, there are everyday things that we want to be able to arm a person with. So when we talk about a robot for every person, imagine having a robot doing, the task of running reports for you, pulling invoices for you, things that would take you 15 or 20 minutes to do. Every person from the lowest or the earliest trainee to the CEO, we all have tasks we do not want to do. Giving a robot for everybody means putting a robot on your desktop, which means that robot will perform those actions. The second piece of it is arming citizen developers. So our goal is to produce 1 billion citizen developers over the coming years. And in doing that, you look at me, I'm not a tech wizard, but I can actually develop my own robot. I can quickly automate a task using Studio X from UiPath. And I can do those things because we've made that interface simple. We've made it easy and intuitive to be able for people to write code in a way without even knowing they're writing code, and therefore programming a robot for their beck and call to do the tasks that they want.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I've seen a lot of interviews with employees within different organizations talking about the fact that they never, they don't have training, they're not developers. It never occurred to them that they would actually be able to, write software that would allow them to build robots. And when you see the excitement in their eyes, and it's kind of taken their job and their skills and their investment in the company, their personal investment in the company, kind of in a whole new level. And it's really, really exciting to see. And I think that, some of the use cases that I've seen within organizations is that so you have this cadre of citizen developers that, that you start small with and that continues to grow throughout the organization. And before you know it, people, I'm immersed in the tech world, but the last thing I do is write code or build anything or anything else. So when you realize, wow, I can actually do this, it's really cool. And I think that, in a world where reskilling and upskilling are an integral part of what needs to happen with regard to the future of work, the future of the workplace. I think that it's really cool to see that those capabilities being developed within teams, and it's really pretty exciting. And I'm sure you see that all the time too.
Very much so. Yeah, I think it's a huge satisfaction to not just talk to CFOs, but people who are doing automation at all levels, at all skill levels. My favorite quick story is somebody who was 43 years working in a company, and she was doing the same report, taking 15 hours of her day with no solution. Within 2 weeks, she automated that task she was doing for 20 plus years, and it now takes her 2 hours a week. And that productivity for her has made her actually now be able to participate in process improvements versus just spending time running the report. Stories like that drive us.
Right. And it's so exciting. And from a customer experience standpoint, whether there are lots of use cases, in financial services, in all different kinds of insurance organizations and healthcare organizations. And when you can take a process that for the customer is an arduous process, and you can make it into something that can be completed so quickly, and you can have an answer or an approval back in just a few minutes time instead of a few days time. And it elevates everything about that customer experience as well. And I think that's what we're looking for from an organizational standpoint, right? Happy customers make for successful businesses. And that's what we're trying to make happen. So we talked just a little bit, but about the kind of tasks that these robots help organizations do. So my question to you is, what are you seeing? What have you seen in these days of the COVID-19 pandemic that makes automation even more important right now than perhaps it might have been a year ago, that might actually help accelerate somebody's journey to automation? You have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what COVID has done, either, whatever, regardless of the economic impact, in some cases it's been favorable economically in an ironic way, and in other ways it's been hardship. But either way, there's a surge in demand. So take the airline industry. The airline industry received a surge in demand, not to purchase tickets, but to cancel tickets. How do you process that? Automation was fast and agile to be able to solve that problem for many of our customers in the airline industry. You take that to banks who are dealing with an influx of requests for financial aid and trade processing and just different things that are happening. Robots are there at the forefront. And what drives that is, what the COVID has really taught us is agility is important. Speed is important. Cost is important. Well, before you used to have to make that trade-off, RPA, in a way, really limits the amount of the trade-off that a CFO or a business leader needs to do. You can automate at a low cost and be effective and implement it fast. And the other thing I would say is COVID has really impacted the entire business. So whether you're in people ops, or whether you're in customer care, or whether you're in supply chain. So what's relatively unique about our software is our softwares don't have LinkedIn profiles. They're not functionally specific. They are functionally agnostic. Right. So that means that you can go and use robots across your entire process base, your entire employee base. That value proposition also has made people say, wow, this is something that I can apply fast and broad and in a cost-effective way. And COVID has really brought that demand for those items to the forefront in a way that we haven't seen for those reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that as business leaders, what we have collectively realized over the course of the last number of months is that business resiliency is mission critical. I mean, every single thing that we do has to be with a view toward what is it that makes our business more resilient? What is it that allows us to scale quickly or to pivot quickly or to embrace change? And, when you're talking about enterprises, embracing change it's not always synonymous with enterprise operations. And so I think we've seen some really rapid shifts. And I do think that from a strategic standpoint, from a business strategy standpoint, resiliency is just sort of at the very top of the list. One of the things, a research note here from our study that we did, the State of Automation study, we showed that, and again, a lot of this study was done before the pandemic affected us, but what our survey showed at that time in late 2019 was that organizations using RPA rebuilt their organizations around RPA and other AI-powered technology in some pretty definitive ways. At that time, 40% of our survey respondents said that they used RPA to revamp critical workflows. And 30% said they completely revamped workflows as using automation. And so I am guessing, this was in pre-pandemic times, I am guessing that if we asked customers that same question right now, that their answers would be different. Is that something that you've seen that, that people are really, I don't want to answer the question for you. Is that something that you've seen, or is my hypothesis on this topic spot on there?
Yes, I think it's yes and no, if I could be a little bit controversial about it. I think there's definitely a different approach to automation and prioritization for the points of resiliency of the other ones that you've made. But there is an underlying piece of automation, which sometimes it's okay to fix, to put a Band-Aid on a process, because it allows you to focus somewhere else. So that discussion of like, do we revamp our workflow, or how do we, how deep do we transform it with automation? Many of our customers have different philosophies. Some are adopting kind of the revamping piece that you've mentioned, right? Other people are actually going and saying, no, by just getting this done, I can focus on the larger issues that are plaguing my company. And so really that philosophy varies depending on the customer and the philosophy that they undergo.
Yeah, that makes sense. We talk a lot here at Futurum, my colleagues and I, about how this is really a time that as opposed to thinking about, rebuilding and relaunching business operations that have been affected by the current business climate, to really, this is an opportunity really to rethink and to refocus and to kind of step back from what it was we thought we were doing and kind of rethink everything that we had thought before. So I think that, that's probably an important part of the equation as well. And your point about, sometimes using a Band-Aid for right now is not a bad thing, as long as you go back later and kind of figure that out again. So I think that's pretty cool. So do you have any, you touched on a couple of things, do you have any really interesting use cases that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I'll share a couple. Just one of the COVID ones is actually disseminating results for our patients. Mater Hospital, I mentioned this. I mentioned this quite a lot. Is they really inspired us. So they use RPA to get patients' results faster. Thinking about the amount of times to actually go grab results, go through go through the networking process of whether it's phone or text or email or uploading it into a patient portal. Imagine if you just step back the number of clicks that takes, the amount of time it takes in doing the same thing again and again, just a different name. And frankly, think about errors, right? People are working so late and a robot doesn't get tired. So that one was very interesting that came across my desk. Other ones that are out there are, I get inspired by very simple integrations that are there for people. So we spend a lot of time and we query, hey, what is our paternity leave? You hear a lot about chatbots, or what's my maternity leave? Now by integrating robots with a lot of the different informational avenues that are out there, you're allowing employees to take action. So, one of the greatest use cases that I loved hearing about, even though it's so simple, was find out my policy. Great. This is the dates I'd like to take out. Please update that into the system in which you're supposed to log it. Something like that, you click yes and the robot goes and does it, is a really good, simple example of that happening. In terms of just, I love giving the complex use cases as well. We have customers using robots to do processes like turning off a wellhead. So imagine in the oil and gas industry, every second of oil flowing potentially creates a large ripple effect, for good or for bad through the supply chain. Being able to regulate that because robots work at a superhuman speed between systems integrations are fantastic. And when you hear use cases like that, you really get inspired by how far robots have come from being just finance-oriented use cases, but have also emerged into supply chain, including customer care and call centers using robots to navigate records for employees so they can focus on the employee and not focus on their computer. Those are just a couple of use cases that I find particularly inspiring.
Those are my favorite part of any conversation. And I think our audience in many instances feels the same way. I really like to hear, this is how these things are making a difference. These are how real companies are using this, real people are using this. So thanks very much for sharing that. So we know from our research and from our many conversations on this topic that automation is a scary thing for employees. And, they often think that it means that people are losing or that they will be losing their jobs. And let's talk about that a little bit. What do you say when people express those concerns?
I think the first thing is, and you mentioned at the beginning, I don't have that marketing line, but even our marketing team, what I really value about them is authenticity. Mm-hmm. There are companies that go and cost out is a part of what automation is. What I would tell people though is automation for that purpose has been around since 1900. Think about the assembly line, how many people it used to take to make a car. Now think about how the process runs through factories and the impact on the workforce. I would say one is people are generally resilient, and upskilling is something we believe in and we're investing. What I would also say though is many of our customers, I would say the majority of them, use what I would say a more efficient allocation so people can focus their time where they want. So think about like accounts payable in the simplest sense. Because you can automate the invoice entry into a system, it doesn't mean that you don't need those people to spend time with disputes with the vendors. Actually, that is part of their job description, but they're spending 10% of their time on it. They're covering 5% of the transactions or 2% of the transactions. By automating tasks, we actually enable people to so to speak, focus on the parts of their job description with greater emphasis or greater coverage. Coverage, as an example, is something really to look at as a benefit of automation, increasing your range of impact. The second piece I would say is, in terms of employees, really, I would say put this software in their hands. Most employees are not losing their jobs because of them. They're going there to do the jobs that they wanted to do in the first place, that they dreamed of at the start of their career. And by putting it in the hands, by turning on the lights so people aren't afraid of the dark, so to speak, you actually empower employees. And when people are empowered, and this is why we believe in citizen development, we believe in our free academy, that fear goes away. And the fear goes away because you realize that, this isn't just about Costa, there's other benefits of it. Compliance, speed, time to close. Those are just small benefits that many CFOs see as well. And we have to be able to articulate those to employees just as much as we talk about cost.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing from the customer side of the fence, I think about the many interactions I've had with call center people, and maybe it's a customer service for e-commerce, or maybe it is an insurance claim or something like that. And all of us have had a situation where you go through these processes and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to stick a rusty fork in my eye. I mean, this is so arduous. I just did the same thing 17 times. And that you're speaking with another human being and a nice human being, but many times we're sort of resigned as customers to slog through those processes. But conversely, when you're involved in a customer experience interaction that is the way it should be, when it's quick and efficient and effective, and the agent that you're dealing with can quickly solve your problem, and their jobs are, you can tell, their jobs are so much more enjoyable, and they don't want to deal with disgruntled customers. So every single part of that process not only makes an employee's job more palatable, more enjoyable, but it also makes that customer on the other end of that experience so much happier. And again, happy customers is what keeps companies afloat, and happy employees also are a significant part of that equation. So I think that when you think about it in that way, and that it's about technology augmenting what it is that humans do in the workplace, it really is the future of work, and it really are all good things. So
really well said.
So my final question is around what's ahead. What do you think organizations are most focused on right now as we weather a global pandemic and we weather business and economic uncertainties? From a CFO with an eye on the business resiliency standpoint, what's ahead?
Yeah, I would say it's bringing certainty into the uncertain times. So certainty around process optimization for the enterprise, not allowing many of the goals previously to be disrupted. And you have a workforce that is now working remote. Agility is more important. Efficiency is more important. You don't have the time to sit down in a conference room or fly 30 people to whiteboard complex solutions. Simplicity matters. So I'd say that the first thing that's next in my mind is really people are going to gravitate to the simplest solutions, because that is what we need to do in our current way of working and coping with the pandemic. The second thing I would say is it's a great time for people to skill up. I think when you look at the market, there are industries that are impacted. Tech is booming. Right. The demand for software is there. And what I actually believe RPA does is it kind of empowers every person to be an entrepreneur, every person to be a software engineer, every person to be a solution architect. So I think there's going to be a mass upskilling, not for the point purpose of simply just finding a new skill or jumping in industry, but because that skill of software is going to be needed to complete and compete in every job that we have as the world continues to navigate uncertain times. And the last thing I'd say is people need to experience joy for work. When there's so much out there that is challenging, you don't want to go back and do the same tasks, as you mentioned, that makes you want to stick that rusty fork in your eye. People want to be liberated from that. They want to engage, even if it's in a two-dimensional way through video conferencing. You want people. And in order to be able to interact with people, you need to be able to put your mouse and a keyboard and hand that over to the robot, which in our mind sits on every desktop as we move through this pandemic.
Well, I think that's awesome, and I very much look forward to that change. I think that you're spot on there, and I think that's an accurate vision of what we're looking at in terms of the future of the workplace. So, Ashim, thank you so much for hanging out with me today on this fireside chat. It's been terrific, and thank you for sharing your insights. And I really, really appreciate the time that you've spent with us.
It was a lot of fun for me too. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, then.